mixing to keep that water column isothermal. So again, you have warm water up here, colder water down here, and in effect you have a collapse or dam break problem going on here. You have colder water flowing up the slope, warmer water flowing offshore. Now that is not so intuitive. But in fact, over the past 7 years, there have been something like 15 different model, tank, and in situ studies showing that that actually occurs. So again, you have to imagine cold water flowing up the slope and warmer water flowing offshore. And the net result, of course, is that this water will end up heating much less rapidly than it would otherwise. And the sea temperature extremes up here will be much less. And again, this can occur over scales of 100 meters or less. Okay, this is some ocean currents. This is cross-shore ocean currents from the Lukey mooring, which is courtesy of Libby Johns at AOML. And what you see down here is sea temperature and winds, wind stress, and the actual exchange of cold water that corresponds to this. So this orange here is basically cold water flowing down a slope at Lukey. And it's difficult to see here, but there's actually warmer water flowing offshore, or onshore rather, intermittently to replace it. So this is strongly correlated with the cold front. You can see another event here with much less wind stress. So again, this might be a wind-driven circulation pattern. This clearly is not. But you see the same effect even for a very rapid a short period of air-sea cooling. Again, this is a modeling study that was done, numerical study that was done, showing basically that you get this cold water flowing down the slope during rapid cooling. You also get cold water flowing back up the slope during rapid warming. There it is. The interesting thing is that during the cold water events, it's a very consistent cell. During the warm water events, it's about 1/2 to 2/3 as energetic because of instabilities, thermal instabilities, as it turns out. This is a statistical comparison of winter versus summer at Lukey. Sea temperature measurements were taken both at the bottom and near the surface. And of course, the ocean currents were measured in a profile. I'm almost out. And what you can see is that during the winter, you had significant water persistently flowing offshore, particularly during the cold fronts, but throughout months of cooling. During the summer, it's a much noisier process. But if you squint, you can see the zero line here. And again, you see, on average, a persistent flow of hot water offshore and replacement of cold water flowing back up inshore. Okay, this is the observed heat exchange at Lukey. Again, very noisy in the summer. So again, this is the actual exchange of heat based on sea temperature differences between near surface and near bottom and the measured ocean current profile. And what you see, and this shocked me, is an actual agreement between what's predicted by this horizontal convection process and particularly in the winter, but also in the summer, what is actually observed at Lukey, which, by the way, is a site that it's in about 22 meters of water, so it's actually about halfway down a reef slope. And this is the result in terms of heat budgets. The heavy black is actual sea temperature annual cycle at these different sites: Molasses, Lukey, Dry Tortugas, which was a problematic site. It's a sandbank offshore, and Long Key, which is the reef flat side on the bay side. The gray is the total heat budget prediction, including the horizontal convection and seasonally varying light attenuation and some of the other terms that I mentioned. And a little difficult to see in the back, but that light gray squiggle, which is tracking the line, is actually the error bars around the prediction based on known measurement errors and propagation through the heat budget. Pretty good agreement at most sites, even at this site where obviously you have much more significant sea temperature variability. You also have much more significant variability in the budget corresponding to that. And the reason for that predominantly, again, is because Long Key is at a flat, Molasses reef is at the top of a slope. Here, horizontal convection basically cannot operate, or operates very ineffectively for the very moderate slope at Long Key. So, air budget. Again, if you're interested in the details, let me know. This is a study that was actually done using only remote sensing data. So the black line, again, is in-water measurements of sea temperature. The red is a 9-kilometer measurement, again, a 9-kilometer grid point measurement of what's called foundation sea temperature based exclusively on satellite data. We take that 9-kilometer data as an input, combine it with a very low relatively very low resolution, a climate scale resolution atmospheric model, reanalysis actually called ERAI, and we use them to predict what happens in the sea temperature at this one site based on high resolution knowledge of the topography of the site, but no in situ data whatsoever. And again, the remarkable thing here is that that blue line, which is the model, based on this red line, which is the global 9-kilometer sea temperature product, satellite sea temperature product, does really a strikingly good job of modeling what happened during the cold snap of 2010. This is also a series of summers, mixed results, but some of the warmest summers, in particular 2005, you can barely see a blue spike there. That does a good job of modeling the extreme sea temperatures that were experienced at Molasses Reef during the summer of 2005, and also the rapid drop-off in those temperatures as a result of hurricane activity. There's a very good paper on that by Manzello et al. In fact, I think that the effect of hurricanes to reduce coral bleaching has now been called the Manzello effect. Derek's one of my colleagues. So, and again in 2009, 2008, pretty good job of modeling what's happening at a very topographically complex site based on nothing but very wide-scale information about the atmosphere and relatively wide-scale information about the ocean. So, kind of striking. I won't talk about that. Habitat suitability and mapping. Again, why is reef sea temperature significant? As we talked about, it can be a significant control on growth rate of reef-building corals. Extremes can cause paling, bleaching, mortality, cold and warm extremes. It can also play a role in the viability and the long-term success of a settlement of reef fisheries fish and of coral organisms themselves. And it can also play a role in either triggering spawning or failing to trigger spawning. There is some evidence to suggest that sea temperature signals actually play a significant role in the timing of spawning of some reef organisms. So unexpected variability in sea temperature can play a role in the ultimate success of coral reproduction as well. Sea temperature is also an excellent proxy below a certain temperature for nutrient delivery onto reefs. The problem you often have when you're looking at a sea temperature record on a shelf or on a reef is that you may not immediately be able to see what cold signals, what cold drops in that sea temperature record are the result of likely upwelling, which again has significance in terms of delivering nutrients, or which are really the result of air-sea effects, air-sea cooling. So the heat budget actually is a way of distinguishing those two types of events. And as I just described, cross-shore flows are also significantly affected by, are driven in fact by rapid heating and cooling on the reefs, as I showed in earlier slides. The significance of that cross-shelf exchange goes beyond just cooling or warming the water. It also has the effect of exchanging nutrients with deeper waters offshore, and so potentially delivering far-field pollutants to the reef and to waters inshore. Again, this is despite the fact that reef crests in general appear to be a fairly good barrier to low-frequency ocean currents, to low-frequency cross-shore currents. And of course, horizontal convection also has the effect of enhancing flushing, which has a significant impact now, is known, on the carbonate dynamics of reefs, which many of you are probably familiar with. So again, horizontal convection plays a role in far-field and deep-water connectivity. And also, coincidentally, horizontal convection is shown to have an impact on prey availability, at least in filter-feeding corals of the Hawaiian Islands. I'm not sure if any studies have been done here in Florida on that. It would be very interesting. Okay, again, two sites of similar depths. One experienced mortality and the other didn't during the cold snap. This is the Florida Reef Resilience Project map of paling and bleaching during the summer of 2007. The thing to note here is that FRRP divides the Keys and the whole reef tract up into very fine-scale cross-shore zones, as well as alongshore regions. They're much broader: Lower Keys, Middle Keys, Upper Keys, Biscayne Bay, southern Sefcree region, northern Sefcree region. So these very fine-scale cross-shore zones, they're normally associated in the mind of people looking at these maps with depth. But the hypothesis that comes out of this PhD research is that likely the variations in thermal impact on corals during a warm but not hot summer like 2007, for example, were as much to do with the slope of the seafloor near the reef as they were with the actual depth of the reef. And so within these, what look like very fine-scale cross-shore zones, leads me to strongly suspect, that there might be very fine-scale, much more fine-scale variability within the zones and within these regions as well alongshore in terms of susceptibility to bleaching. This again is Dr. Mueller-Carter's 1 kilometer 2007 weekly anomaly for the week of August 27th to September 2nd. And what you can see is that there's some fairly fine-scale variability in this sea surface temperature anomaly, but it does not correspond well with the observed geographic variability and observed bleaching. So again, something else other than what's happening at the sea surface is happening there. Okay, a quick summary. Again, dominant sea temperature variability at these sites was annual, diurnal, and semi-diurnal. The flat sites showed a significant weather band variability, but sites on sloping seafloor, including sites inshore of the crest, showed little or no weather band variability and relatively weak atmospheric covariability across all bands. Only one site showed an indication of an interannual warming trend, 93 to 2007, and unfortunately Sombrero Key's sea temperature reliable record ended in 2008. So it's an even worse situation than with the other sites in the Keys. The natural argument is, well, in the last 6 years, I'm sure that trend has been reversed. Who knows? It hasn't been measured. But this same site showed inertial period variability persistently throughout its record, indicating likely enhanced exchange of water with the deeper waters of Portales Terrace and Florida Straits offshore, Straits of Florida offshore. Dominant heat balances at the sites. In general, the heat balances depended on seafloor slope, depth, reflectivity. Again, they depended strongly on light attenuation, which is very poorly measured in situ in the Keys and elsewhere. One of the reasons why Dr. Hu's lab's work on light attenuation and on ocean color analysis in general is so valuable. At sloping sites, horizontal convection dominates the balances of the heat budget. In warm months, horizontal convection is balancing absorbed insolation. In cooling months, it's balancing what's called latent surface flux. That's evaporative cooling, which tends to be the dominant cooling term at these shallow sites. Over the reef flat, on the other hand, absorbed insolation and latent heat flux generally balance one another throughout the year, which is one reason why you see more extreme sea temperature variability at those sites. Benthic heat exchanges at these reef flat sites also can be important. And by benthic, I mean literally heat exchange with the substrate, whether it's composite sediment, sand, carbonate rock. But those benthic heat exchanges are not nearly rapid enough to balance the rapid warming and cooling over those reef flat sites. So again, to adequately model reef's thermal response, we have to look at details of very local seafloor topography. The topography in this study, by the way, was 90-meter resolution, horizontal resolution. So not very high resolution, but certainly higher than is usually used for oceanographic studies. By parameterizing these very small-scale processes, we can estimate realistic sea temperature variability, even using very low-resolution surface-based data. So satellite sea surface temperatures and foundation sea temperatures derived from them, and climate scale reanalyses. Horizontal convection is a very significant term in the heat budgets. It also leads to enhanced cross-shelf exchange. So ultimately, mapping of habitat suitability for benthic organisms and for reef fisheries will be conditioned by a correct understanding of these small-scale oceanographic processes. Again, remote monitoring thermal stress is greatly improved with the heat budget model. I would say it's made possible with the heat budget model, but I wouldn't put that in writing. Heat budget balance relies on site-specific terms. Again, horizontal convection, seabed flux, that's the benthic exchange I mentioned earlier, and light attenuation. I don't know if Dr. Hu or Dr. Barnes would be able to speak to whether there's very high spatial resolution variability in light attenuation or not. So, thank you. Sorry for going over time. If I offer time for people to grab a beer, can we see if there are questions?